Hexadecimal, also known as hex, has a base number of 16, and this means that it uses 16 symbols to represent numbers. And these symbols are numbers from 0 to 9 and letters from A to F. Let's observe the similarities and differences between hexadecimal and decimal. So we have a table here that contains two columns. The first column shows the decimal numbers, and the second column shows the hexadecimal numbers. This table shows the equivalent hexadecimal number of a certain decimal number. Now let's observe the pattern. The first 10 numbers of decimal is the same as with the first 10 numbers in hexadecimal. But for the succeeding numbers, starting from 10 down to 15, so there are 6 numbers, if you will count this starting from 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So these 6 numbers are in the form of letters in hexadecimal. So 10 becomes A, 11 becomes B, 12 becomes C, 13 becomes D, up to 15, which in this case is F. Okay, again, so let's review. The first 10 numbers in decimal are also numbers in hexadecimal. But after that, the succeeding numbers starting from 10 down to 15, these numbers are in the form of letters, starting from A up to F, which in this case, F represents 15 in decimal. So 10 numbers plus 6 numbers, this equals to 16. That is why hexadecimal has a base number of 16. So the first 10 numbers of decimal is the same as the first 10 numbers of hexadecimal. And the succeeding numbers, the 6 numbers, are in the form of letters in hexadecimal. And then, in decimal number, 16 becomes 10 in hexadecimal. And 17 becomes 11, and so on. So this will keep on going until the 10th number. So let's observe. 16, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So all of these starting from 16 up to 25, these are also numbers from hexadecimal starting from 10 to 19. Again, the succeeding numbers starting from 26 becomes in different format. So it now contains letters in hexadecimal. So that is the pattern. Every 10 numbers, these are also represented numbers in hexadecimal. After that, the succeeding numbers, the 6 numbers, contains letters. So that is the pattern of hexadecimal when it is compared to decimal. So let's summarize this. The first 10 numbers in decimal are also represented with numbers in hexadecimal. And then the succeeding 6 numbers in decimal, these are represented with letters. And that pattern continues up to infinity. All right, so this time, let's try to see how hexadecimal are represented in decimal. So let's take this example. FEE.1A. So the base number is 16 for hexadecimal. So we will use that base number as the multiplier for each hexadecimal number we have on this given. So let's start with the first E. And we know that E is 14 in decimal. So we write 14 times the base number raised to 0 plus another E, which is also 14, plus F, and that is 15. And then let's work on the fractional part, plus 1 times 16 raised to negative 1 plus 10 times 16 raised to negative 2. Now let's simplify this part. So 14 times 16 raised to 0, this is 14 times 1, and this becomes 14 times 16, and this becomes 14 times 256. Okay, now let's work on this part. So this becomes 1 times 1 over 16 raised to 1 plus 10 times 1 over 16 raised to 2. Let's start with this part. So 4 times 1, this becomes 14. And then 14 times 16, this becomes 224. And then 15 times 256, this becomes 3,840. Then let's solve for the fractional part. 1 times 1 over 16 raised to 1. And then plus 10 times 1 over 16 raised to 2. And that is 256. All right, so we are done with our whole number. So we'll just copy this. And then let's start solving this part. So this becomes 0.0625. And then plus 10 times 1, that is 10 divided by 256. This gives us 0.0390625. Okay, so let's add them all. And this results to 4078.1015. So this means that the decimal form of FEE1A is equals to 4078.1015 in decimal. All right, so let's move to our next example. This time, let's try solving this hexadecimal number, D1CE point AB. Let's start solving for E. So E in decimal, that is 14, plus C, and C in decimal, that is 12, plus 1 times 16, plus D, and D is 13 in decimal, so 13 times 16. Then let's work on A, on the fractional part. So A is 10, so we have 10 times 16, plus B, that is 11, so 11 times 16. Then let's start simplifying this part. 14 times 1, then 12 times 16, and then 1 times 256. And then last is 13 times 16 cubed, that is 13 times 4096. And then let's move to the fractional part. 10 times 16, or 10 times 1 over 16, plus 11 times 1 over 16 square. Okay, so let's start with this. This gives us 14, and this one, that is 192. This gives us 256, and then the last part of the whole number is 53,248. Now let's move on solving our fractional part. This will give us 10 times 1 over 16 plus 11 times 1 over 256, because 16 square is 256. Okay, so we are through with our whole number part. So we will just copy everything from there. And now let's start solving this part. So this gives us 0.625 plus 0.042967. Then let's add them together. So this will give us a result of 53,710.667. So this shows that the hexadecimal D1CE.AB has a value of 53,710.667 in decimal. All right, so that wraps up our lesson for hexadecimal, and see you in the next lectures.